I'm going to start the recording. I'm going to stop my webcam just so that we have some make sure that my bandwidth is okay as I get into this presentation. I'm going to be sharing a first of all, question. There's a poll now in progress, so you will see the poll on your screen. Feel free to answer the questions on this, the single question on this poll. It's a mark all that apply, and it'll just give us a sense with what your goals are in this particular session today. Okay. Again, we still have people joining, and like I said, 274 people have registered for this conference. I see current attendance at 163, so glad that many people are able to attend today. And again, reminding you that this presentation is being recorded and will be shared to Pass TV. So let's give it a few more seconds here, and then I'm going to close the poll. And I'm seeing just a live stream of people still clicking buttons here on the screen. And also I see the participation rate. So I see it now climbing at 70% now have responded to this poll. Feel free to not respond, that's fine. I mean, we've got well over 70%, so I think we'll have a pretty good sample of not just the people coming today, but also people that are not attending or who might be interested in the exam. We can find out what the goals are that people have for knowing this material. We have an interesting thing. People are joining, and then so I also see people responding, and the percentage rates going up and down as people are joining the meeting. They're seeing the poll and voting. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share the results here on the screen. Okay, so you can see the goals here. You can see, I guess most people are here today to develop their confidence with Azure Data Science. And along that goal, I'll make sure that as I'm making comments today, I will speak to that that topic because my personal goal, even though you know, in terms of priorities, it's not required for my current role at Microsoft. I do have a learning goal or a certification goal, and that was AI 100 for where I am right now. And it turned out the DP100 was an extra exam. So I will now transition to the slide deck. So let's see here. Okay. All right, so you should now see the first slide here. And welcome to this presentation, Azure Certification DP100, Designing and Implementing a Data Science Solution on Azure. And I'm going to start with a story, just give you all some context. So my name is Mark Tabladillo. I have a doctorate in industrial engineering, which I got from Georgia Tech. I've been in the analytics space about 20 years. I've been at Microsoft for 3 years, and the 7 years previous to that, I was part of the Microsoft MVP program in the area of SQL Server and data platform. But the story about this exam actually started last week. As I mentioned earlier, I had one exam I needed to do for my role at Microsoft, and that was AI 100. We're not here to talk about that exam, but on Wednesday, which was just Wednesday last week, I saw this DP100 exam. It said it was in beta. I said, well, okay, I have the cycles to take this exam, so I went ahead and signed up. I took the exam as a 3-hour block, so at 10 a.m. my exam time started, and I was finished in about, I would say, 90 minutes or so. So I decided, okay, that's good enough. I had done some light prep by looking at the outline, and then took the exam. I went in there, and then at the end of 90 minutes, I discovered that I had passed the exam. So I was surprised of two things. One, that I had passed, and with more than a minimum score, and then also that the exam was out of beta. So I left the exam booth and went home, and that day I only had another meeting scheduled, which was 2 p.m. It was a internal Microsoft data science chat, and I thought that I would take my story to this chat group. So in that time between, I don't know, it was about noon, I wrote an exam guide and I posted it to one of our internal groups. And then with less than an hour's notice, I told some people I would share that exam guide at the 2 o'clock meeting. So this was less than an hour notice in a meeting that normally has maybe 4 or 5 people. I thought maybe 10 people would show up. 80 people showed up. And I thought, wow, this is so popular. And then you even see for today's meeting, 270 people. And so I think this exam is new. There's not a lot of information out there. And so I decided, it was responsible for me to share the information that I have just from having taken this exam. Several of my colleagues inside Microsoft are required to take it for their role. And I think it's a good exam. That's why I'm even talking about it. That's why I took it. I think there's value in having this particular exam. Now, why people go for certification, we saw the list there on the screen of what this particular audience is motivated in terms of this current exam. And we saw the number one answer, at least for this audience, is developing confidence with the Azure data science tools. So many of these tools are new, and the Microsoft Cloud is now one that's sharing so many open source technologies, and we're calling out Python, R, Spark, and so many other technologies out there that are so common and used in the data science space. So I'm leaving this deck, by the way, will be shared, will be published on my SlideShare. So if you don't get the link, feel free to look at it later. Let's go into this particular exam. And first of all, this one is intended to earn what's called the Microsoft Certified Azure Data Scientist Associate. In the last year, just to give you the story, Microsoft did re-engineer the certification process and has now come up with these badges that you see on the upper left and this new exam structure. And many of the exams that were available just 1 year ago are being retired in favor of this new structure. What's behind the structure? I don't know. Personally, I don't work on the certification team. But what I want to do is now start going through the certification information and just show you some information here from the website. And we'll go through this. What we're going to be doing is just having I'm going to be having a conversation based on what I see on the website and then matched with what I also saw from the exam that I took. Okay, so let me switch screens here and making sure that I'm closing some of these programs here that are running. Quit out of that and go to this screen. I'll be sliding it over. There we go. Okay, so now what Microsoft is rolling out are what's called these role-based certifications. And there are, and I'm going to show you how this matches between what you see on the website, which is our Microsoft Learning portal, and then what these certifications are. And there's a concerted effort to make sure that what's on the Learning portal is matching what's on the certification exams. I think that's a big advantage comparing this year versus last year. And by the way, since last week, I saw some changes, which I'm going to be pointing out. For this exam, there have been changes in 1 week. So there's a bit of a dynamic conversation now going on between the Learning website. This is the source of the people who are putting together the certification exams and the actual content of the exam. Now there are several role-based certifications. I'm going to click this button and we're just going to navigate the web together as I go through this. You'll see what some of these certifications are. They are in several categories. One's called Fundamentals, one's called Associate, and one's called Expert. This particular exam is right here. It's considered an associate exam. It's just a name. Just roll with it. All right, this is what it is. And if you go to the website, you'll notice that there's one exam required at the moment for this associate role certification. It's this exam. Would I call it a data science exam? No. Would I call it a data science technology exam? Yes. Why do I say that? Because Azure is a technology. So the questions that you will see on this exam have to do with applying Azure technology for this use case, which is data science. Will this exam show you everything that you need to know about data science? The answer is no. There are other things to learn, and that's a bit beyond scope for this presentation today. What we want to focus on today is how to best prepare for this exam, what is on it, and then how to best prepare for it. So there are 4 skills measured, and you'll see on the final score report, it will have a score breakdown for how well you did on each of these areas. And if I remember my own, I think I probably did the worst on this category. It just turned out that way. On my particular exam, there were 39 questions. There were 6 questions in a mode called do not go back. So that means you could not go back and forward. You had to answer the question and then move to the next question. So there were 6 like that. There were 5 questions associated with a single lab question, and then the rest of the 39 were questions where you could go back or go forward and backward and answer them all as a group before moving on. So that was the setup, and some of them were category. And I don't really know. I could guess which ones were in these different categories, but these basically do describe the task. Now, if you look at the list here, notice it says select development environment, assess the constraints and system requirements and development environment. What it doesn't show here is what environment, like, what technology are we talking about? Not so clear just by looking at this list of skills measured. Preparing data for modeling, I think, was probably my highest section, if I remember correctly. But this has to do with transforming data, performing exploratory data analysis, cleansing and transforming data. And I guess because I've worked with data for so long. Feature engineering, this one has to do with performing feature extraction, scaling, and then maybe defining the optimality criteria. And that's what they're talking about, choosing metrics for a machine learning algorithm, and then developing models, splitting data sets, and those types of information. Now, it shows here an optional prerequisite on Azure Fundamentals. Now, I recommend that there's some training available for this Azure Fundamentals exam, and it's a separate exam, but it's a good exam to take if you're brand new to Azure. Again, for a confidence level type of exam. It doesn't really prepare you to do specific work, but it does show some important points about the Azure infrastructure. Now, let me go back to my deck, because again, all this information, all the keynotes I have for today are in this deck. So this deck's going to have everything that you would need to know, and of course it's going to be on the recording. For this, you go to Data Science Learn, and that Data Science Learn, I think, goes to this page. Yeah, it goes to this page. And then if you notice at the bottom, there's some self-paced learning, instructor-led learning, and guide to training. Those are the 3 things that are at the bottom. And you notice this for all the certification exams, they're having these 3 sections, and this is going to be our launch off for what I'm going to recommend. So let me go to the learning plan. So the one that I like, let me start with this one on the left. This one, first link, if you notice, is Start Learning. It's just going to go to the page. It's going to show Data Scientists and Learning Path. And here is one of the areas where I noticed that there's a difference between this week and last week. One thing that I did is I went through some of these learning courses. You'll see there's a very generous time estimate on how long it will take you to finish these. Now, because I use this in my daily work and because I've seen some of these technologies for years, I click through some of these modules really quickly. So although this first one says an hour 43 minutes, it didn't literally take me that long. Some of these or many of these training modules will have interactive labs, and I'm going to show some of them as we go along. And I didn't necessarily do all the labs as I was going through this, so I finished much more quickly. But what I want to show on this top panel, and this is between this week and last week, there were 3, 4, 5 of these courses on this learning path last week. This week, they added 2 more. I don't know when this got added, but guess what? They added Databricks and ones on data engineering, and then ones more on knowledge and insights. So here's my modified idea. And this is why I say this learning website is really important. I just showed what the learning objectives were. Remember when I was on this page? I was showing what the learning objectives. You can see how they're very general. But then when you go down to this prep, you're going to see these courses, and they are going to be more specific about what exactly could be on this exam. Now, there may have been a question or two on Databricks, which again is a topic I know well just from using it at work. But it was not a major focus. And when the exam that I took, the major focus was Machine Learning Studio. And that was where that's where I saw most of the questions. I think in the future, we're going to see more in this topic, which is the Azure Machine Learning Service, which I think is going to be probably our core fundamental backbone for so many Azure solutions. So if you wanted to know one single topic on this whole panel, which is probably the key flagship technology, is going to be the machine learning service. But right behind that is, and this is really for big data uses. So in my current role at Microsoft as a cloud solution architect, the people and the clients I talk to have big data intentions for using the cloud. And so Databricks is a very interesting technology to them. It is probably not a technology that most of the data science customers on Azure will use. I don't know the answer to that, and it could just be, Spark is still new to a lot of people. They haven't used it, or they haven't had a use case for why they would want to do that. And then Databricks is a service that delivers Spark and Spark solutions. So I'm just thinking that altogether, all of these 7 are good courses to go through in prep for the exam. And again, if you look at the time hour estimates, some of these are like 7 hours, like even this Azure Fundamentals, 9 hours. Well, I've seen Azure Fundamentals, again, from working in Azure for years. So again, I clicked through this very quickly. What is important really is just to go into these areas or these different online trainings, just see what the topics are. And that's the important thing. Pragmatically, on taking the exam in terms of exam strategy, I think my core impression is it's not bad to plan to take a cert exam 2 times. And the reason is, and especially in this exam, there are no practice exams out there. And even when you do have these practice exams out there for certifications, they're not going to be exactly like the exam that you take. So it's not such a bad idea to plan on taking the exam twice. Now look at me, AI100. It covers a lot of technologies that I don't see for many of my clients. And I think the reason is because the AI100 topics, they're very easy to use, the cognitive services. So in my case, I took the exam the first time. I didn't pass. I almost passed, but I didn't. And then I took it a week later and I passed. So, and then I saw a lot of either very similar or if not identical questions, when I took it again. And then this data science exam I did take 1 time, passed on the first shot. And so I was happy about that. So these are the 7 courses. Now I'm going to go back to the screen and I'm going to show you how they map to this screen. So we had that self-paced link, and when I clicked self-paced, I went to that screen. When I go to, I'm going to pass instructor-led for now, but I'll let you explore that on your own. The third one here, guide to training. When I click that, there is a learning path, not just for this cert exam, but all the cert exams. So if you, whether it's this DP100 or if you want to take one of the other cert exams, you'll see a similar type slide. It's just a single page kind of infographic. And these modules, when you click these modules, where do they go? They go to this list. And let me give an example. So build AI solutions with Azure Machine Learning Service, clicks through and it goes to here. All right, so let's look at this one just to see. And you can see also that I finished it. You get these, kind of dummy points for doing these courses. And this one's good because it shows the difference between Azure Machine Learning Service and Azure Machine Learning Studio, and that's important. And then create a machine learning experiment. And let me see this, if this particular one has a lab. Some of these have built-in labs inside, and just reading through these, you can see what the technologies are. They've got a lot of these graphics. You can go through and read them. And then at some point, they also have some examples, such as here. And this particular example, they want you to make apparently an Azure notebook, okay, which is here. So it gives you directions for making an Azure notebook and then also some commands to run so you can get some experience. People learn different ways. And I tend to learn more by reading documents and understanding how it works than rather actually doing it. But you have to know your own learning style. In the case of my exam, because I've used Azure Machine Learning Studio with several clients throughout the past 3 years, that's really the reason that I was able to navigate a lot of the questions, because I've seen this or have had to answer very similar questions in work environments. And then you'll see here also, it gives you the chance to check your knowledge, to see how well you know the services and what they do. And although I did check it, it doesn't show me what the answers were from the other day when I did this. But you can go through, answer these questions, and some of them have questions, so they are good to take. Now, that being said, so let's go back to this page, because I was talking about the learning path for Azure Data Scientist. I think this is again a perspective, a point of view. My point of view is that all these topics are likely to show up on your own exam, but it's probably not going to be sufficient just to take these exams and try to pass it. So I think these are necessary, but they're not sufficient. That's my point of view. So let me go back to my slide deck, because I do give some now on slide 6 and 7. I'm starting to imply where I think the effort should be. So that learning path is what we just saw. It was that one page. So I'm going to show it again. It's right here. This is the learning path that we just saw in the background. And these 3 links, I think, are the most important links to study in terms of reading right now. And then I'm going to have a second page of a scan over. And one thing I did this morning, seeing that Databricks was on there, is I added a link for Databricks, which was new. Why is it new? Because our documentation is kind of dynamic. So there may be an intention to put more Databricks content on there, and then so I'm saying to look at that. So let's go through now this reading well. I'm going to click through to this link, and I'm going to say, let's skip verification. We're going to go to this link. All right. This first link is, what are the machine learning products at Microsoft? Okay, it says 7 minutes to read. I think this page is important to study, like know this entire page. Why? Because these are like the core technologies. And by the way, you'll notice Azure Databricks is on this list. MLNet, while not specifically called out, is here. I think it's good to just read what it says right here about what is this technology. Windows ML is on here. So some of these are going to be more important than others. Going back to the top of this page, you see cloud-based options and on-premise options. Now, this exam is for Azure. So obviously there's going to be focus on the cloud-based and not for the on-premise. So don't worry on this exam about on-premise. Why? Because it's an Azure exam. So development platform and tools, a data science virtual machine is important. Databricks is important. These other two, not as important. Okay, Azure Machine Learning Service, like I said, this is the one that I think will be the backbone framework for where we are going in terms of Azure technology. So it's important to know what this is. I saw, however, a lot of questions on Azure Machine Learning Studio. And so this is a technology that, again, like I said, I've worked with several years. I was on Project Passau, which was the beta name, and even before that it was called Data Lab. And I've seen this technology for years, and I've done it for so many trainings and use it so many times. So because of actual experience, I have an edge in knowing what this technology is. And by the way, I noticed even on the Azure portal, and this is what I noticed with a client yesterday, there's already a preview of a new visual environment which represents next generation of Studio that's showing up for service. But it's a preview experience, and it's just showing, again, this is something that's happened in the last week, but it's showing up as a window that will be used for the service, or the it's a visual designer. That's what it is. Just like what Studio is, it's a drag and drop. Visual designer allows for coding with the widgets, or Python or R or SQL can be used in this environment as it's currently configured. But the next gen is already showing up in service as a active technology. Cognitive services is not a focus of this exam. So I'm just telling you that. This machine learning, SQL Server machine learning is not a focus. Microsoft Machine Learning Server is not a focus. However, Azure Data Science Virtual Machine is a focus and should be on there. And as I called out earlier, Azure Databricks is now showing up on the learning page, and therefore I think should be looked at least at the high level. So again, the intention of this page is just to read that one page. Now let's go to the next one. So I have two here to study, Azure Machine Learning Studio and Data Science VM. And I'm going to tell you exactly my perspective on how you should study for this. So my perspective is there are two sections. If you look on the left side, there's a section called Overview and there's a section called Concepts. And you'll see this taxonomy throughout the Microsoft documentation. My point of view is you need to read the Overview and the Concepts and know exactly, like, all the pages that are in Overview and all the pages that are in Concepts. Now, as I said, some of us are more in tune with actually doing something. So if you're that person, you have to know your own learning style. Then what you also need to do, in addition, and I'm going to add this in addition to knowing that, or maybe even you want to do this tutorials first, and then go back to maybe overview, tutorials, and then concepts in that order, is go ahead and do the tutorials also. Because the information here on doing tutorials might be very similar, like the pictures you see here on tutorials might be very similar to what you see on the CERT exam, and then somebody's asking a question about what is that. So if you've never seen these widgets before, like he's showing on the screen here, if you've never seen that, and then you get to the exam, you might see a picture that has something like that. And I saw questions like this. I saw questions that had properties, and it would have options here, and some of the questions were, okay, click the drop-down box and show me what the option is that you would pick. And it would be that type of a question. So those are actual types of questions that I saw in the exam, and there were quite a few of them. So I think it's good to, again, go through the overview and the concept section. And if you want to really help your own experience level, go through the tutorials. And again, remember how I'm ranking these. I'm ranking the learning path, which is those 9 courses or whatever they are now, and reading that single page in technologies, going to Studio. So we saw that there's an overview, a tutorials, and then a concepts. And then I'm going to click through the data science VM because I think the same thing. You'll see here also there's an overview and then there's a concepts. And I saw questions on what are the differences between the different VMs? What are the differences? And some of those were questions. So, and we can see what they are. There's a data science VM, there's a deep learning VM. I don't remember any questions on the Geo AI data science VM, and I also have not used that in any circumstance. So I'm just telling you. But I have used in presentations the data science VM and the deep learning VM. So again, overview and concepts, read those. Now the scan over. The scan over, you know, I said last week, and I, again, reiterating my perspective, that I can foresee that future iterations of the exam will all be built around Azure Machine Learning Service. And it's especially true now that I saw the visual interface for a drag and drop experience is available in Azure. And so because I saw that already, you know, I think that we'll see more questions for machine learning, for data science coming off of this technology. Again, there's an overview. Again, there is a concepts section, how this works, what it is, and we'll also see tutorials. So you'll have to decide on, you know, your own time spend, how much time you want to spend with these technologies. I didn't really see, you know, even if I look over this list, there may have been a question on FPGA. There may have been one question on ONNX, or at least have an option, you know, in a question, what is ONNX? But there was not really a lot of questions on the service. However, it's still good to know where this technology is. And again, I'm going to speak to what many people said their goal is. If your goal is to develop confidence in the Microsoft stack, you probably will want to spend more time on this particular topic that I'm showing right now, Azure Machine Learning Service, than any of the other topics. And in fact, even if you bypass the exam or you find that you didn't have time to take the exam, this one topic represents where Microsoft and Azure are going as far as supporting the open source technologies out there, which are Spark, Python, R, and then ONNX, and whatever else comes along. But this framework is going to be implying the environment where you can spin up compute and have it work with storage, and then also work toward deployment of machine learning. So there may have been one question on Databricks. Azure Container Instances, again, it's good to know what that is. And then down here on the other screen, Azure Kubernetes Service, it's good to read what that is. The reason too is because the containers and the Kubernetes are integrated with the Azure Machine Learning Service. And then Azure Notebooks, which is a lightweight, we call it serverless, it just means managed service. So Azure Notebook. Okay, and again, I wanted to save some time for questions. If you do have a question, go ahead and start typing it in right now. And as I am going now toward the end of what I wanted to say for today, if you wanted to ask yourself, what would you want to take next as an exam? These are my perspectives. You might want to consider some of these other certifications. This AI engineer is the one with AI 100. This is the one I had to take as a requirement for my current role. There's also the Azure Data Engineer and the Azure Developer Associate exams. You can see what those are on the website, and you can see if there's an interest. I think these certifications are complementary toward the one that we're talking about today. And pragmatically, if you're a data scientist, and I know so many people who are data scientists at Microsoft, their scope of knowledge is not just the topics that are in DP100, but also touch several of these other technologies. And certainly in the roles that I've had, our scope of possible topics that we may see in working with clients and customers are going to go beyond just the DP100. So if you want to see some next certs that I think are very closely related in terms of career in this area, at least just read the high level about what these exams are. You can also take the same type of approach. There will be a learning path for each one of these. There will be learning courses that are associated with these. You'll see that same Azure Fundamentals course for all of these, but then also they'll have some of their own unique content. They are also on the page. If I go back to this page in learning, let me go back to higher level, browse. When you go to roles, you can go down here and you can see some of the other roles that are possible. And if I click, for example, AI engineer, and I go to learning path, we'll wait for it to. Okay, so I went through and I took the different courses related to the AI engineer. And again, repeating what I said earlier, I think it's important to see what's on this learning page. I don't think this is going to be sufficient to pass the exam. You still, I recommend doing other reading, and I would do it for myself. I have done it for myself, and it's the same thing that I recommend as far as passing the exam, and that's reading the Microsoft documentation. And if you want a stretch goal, here's our expert exams. The one that interests me right now at the moment is Solutions Architect. Several in my team, this was on their learning path, meaning that that's the certification they needed to pass. The one that's behind Solutions Architect is a much harder exam. Actually, there's two exams. So there's two exams there. They are harder. I can guarantee they are going to be harder than DP100 and AI100 because there's just more technologies involved and the questions are more specific. It does take more time to study for those. But they are at a different level of exam, and they have a different use case, namely to create a solution using Azure technologies. But to let you know that there are other exams out there that go into some of the other areas of Azure. So I'm going to leave my Connect screen on here, and I know some people have typed in some questions, so I'm going to go ahead and start answering those questions. And if you just have a comment, I would love to hear your comment. If you've passed the exam, I'd love to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to answer the first question here. How does an Azure certification help a developer at Microsoft? For current work, they use some of the technologies discussed here. I'm not sure how certification will help you further. So my response on that is I view the certification is what average people across all use cases will need to do with the technology. Now, in my personal role, I am a client-facing person. I previously was in services, and which is Microsoft's consulting area. And in that use case, we would typically only be using the technologies related to larger technology deliveries. That being said, I often use Studio in most of the projects that I was delivering for services. And even this week, brand new client that I worked with on the last 3 days at the Microsoft Technology Center here in Atlanta. It's actually in North Atlanta, Alpharetta. We landed on Studio as the best solution for the first data science problem that they brought us. So in terms of working at Microsoft, now kind of the thing that's cool working for Microsoft is they give you unlimited takes on exams, so you can continue to go back, and Microsoft's paying for every time you go. So that's kind of cool. So I would just look at that and make that possible. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go to the very, very back beginning. Why not Teams? Okay, are there vision? Okay, bye-bye. Okay, some people only saw the title slide. Okay, the deck available for download will be available on SlideShare. Someone asked, Sasha asked, did you do the old ML exam 7774? How does that differ from DP100? And I can already answer that. I don't believe 774 talked about Azure ML Service or Databricks. And in any case, like what I was saying today, the interface now is available in preview, the drag and drop for ML Service. If you have the 774 book, and I know one of the authors, Paco Gonzalez, if you're even on here, and today is one of the authors, lives in Atlanta, longtime friend, co-presenter, and we used to work together at Solid Q, is one of the authors of the certification book. So if you already have that, cool. I wouldn't necessarily buy that if you don't have it, but instead I would follow the plan that I'm giving today because it's a bit newer. Okay, the links are going to be all on the deck. Okay, sound might be cutting off for some people, and sorry about that, but I do know that on the video recording, which will be shared, you'll get the high quality audio because it's being recorded here on my local computer. So if you need to hear it again because the audio was cutting out or video may not have been streaming correctly for you, the recording that will be shared will be high quality. Okay, PowerPoint will be on SlideShare. Which Python packages do you need to study for DP100? I saw a Python question. I feel the Python question I saw would be answered by general knowledge of Python and not specific knowledge of packages. So I did not see, for example, choices of trying to make algorithm selections from scikit-learn. All right, so you're not going to see that. It's not a Python exam. I would not worry about studying it at the package level for that purpose. Do you need to write code? And the answer is no. However, going back to that Python question, one of the questions I saw was a drop down where you had to pick the correct Python code to complete the statement. And again, I feel that what I saw, in fact, I only saw one question like that. Again, I don't know if it counted as one question or several questions because it had different parts. But I don't feel it's, my perspective, useful to do a whole lot of Python study for this particular exam because you would just be going hit and miss. And also you don't see it really called out on the major exam objectives or in the major courses. So if you really need to stick with the technologies that are very important. If you want to study or read more about Python, that would be more about the code you would see in the tutorials, in the examples that you go along the way. But no, you do not need to write code from scratch, if that's the question. Okay, what applications or tools needed to practice tutorial and prepare for this exam? Do you need a licensed version of the tools? You would need an Azure subscription to do the tutorials, for which you can get a free subscription when you first sign up with a new email will key you into getting a trial Azure subscription, which should be sufficient, and if you need it at all. Some of the tutorials are online and they don't require subscription. I can't speak across the learning technologies because I didn't pay attention at that level. But if you do need an Azure subscription, you can get one with a new email or when you first sign up for Azure. Okay, so could you touch more on your key topic when you mentioned today there's multiple ways to develop and deploy R or Python or Spark or deep learning on Azure? The differences are important for this exam. And so when I said earlier that there's multiple ways to deploy them, I'm referring to this list of technologies. When I talked about this list, you will see, for example, Azure Machine Learning Service is a deployment technology for Spark. but it's also a deployment technology for R, and it's a deployment technology for Python that could use containers, and that's where studying what these technologies do is important. So it's not, again, if you're coming from a general data science background and they say, oh, do you know Python? Do you know R? Do you know Spark? Well, this exam is not really about focusing on those languages. You'll see those languages in here, but the focus is going to be on Azure and how these technologies are used to deliver those solutions. And another example, I'll call out here, the virtual machine. I've even done sessions for this virtual group using the data science virtual machine. It is a technology where one can build an R solution, a Python solution, a Spark solution, and yet it's important to understand how the different modes of these machines are available. For example, there's one in front of CPUs, one in front of GPUs. What's the difference? Why would it make a difference? And then it's important to know that for being in a corporation, perhaps where you're doing a model training and you're training a deep learning model. All right, what would be the difference? Why would you want to use a GPU or why would you want to use a CPU? I'm not going to answer the question. I'm just going to say that the means to achieve the Python, the R, the Spark are really the focus of this exam. Okay, one person asked, any inputs for the DP200 and 201 certifications? If you have any other questions about the other certs, they have their own learning path. The slides and recording, I am going to make the slides available right after the meeting, and then the recording is going to take time to process, and it does take time to render, but my intention is to publish that today. And the PowerPoint isn't available. My friend Rick says, and I heard this comment earlier, it was the hardest test of the 4 new data exams. And of course, Rick is so experienced in so many areas. We have to also factor in our own personal experience with technology. Where are we spending our time? And, because earlier I answered the question, this exam is kind of an average exam covering so many things. Some of the things on this exam, I don't think I'll ever encounter in terms of an actual question in a real world environment. But most of the questions I think are relevant to either questions that I will personally face in my own data science practice or in my current role in advising or working with clients who are new to Azure data science technology, certainly qualifies for that. So I find personally for my use case, well over 50% is useful for that. How does AI 100 compare to DP100? AI 100 focuses more on the cognitive services, and that is the short answer. But you also see questions on Azure. And I don't, for example, AI 100, I don't remember any questions on Studio, for example. Someone wants to see that read well slide again. And again, I'm going to post this deck, but I'll leave that on the screen. Somebody shared, can you share the book name? So there's a book for 70774, and I don't have it available, but I am not, because I'm not recommending that for prep for this exam, I'm not going to, look up the name right now. But you just look for 77474 exam prep, you can look for that. That exam is retiring. So I'll just let you know, I mean, in the background here in my home, I have so many books that are right in front of my face because that's where my bookshelf is. There's a lot of books that I collect and have collected over the years just for my own knowledge. So again, speaking to what many people said earlier, developing confidence includes learning beyond what you immediately need. So if you want to learn more about that, you can do that. Someone said, can Microsoft reimburse me for the certificate cost? So these are certifications. There is no reimbursement policy unless you work for Microsoft. So if you work for Microsoft, you do have a reimbursement. And if you are an employee of Microsoft and you're not sure about how to get that, just send me an email privately. And the last comment I see in here on the screen, Studio has some drawbacks. Do you find this inefficient for production environment? Seems to not be scalable, and other comments. So as I said earlier, I am seeing the visual interface now available inside machine learning service. And one thing you'll notice, it's a difference when I go to, I want to see right now if there is some information in here about the visual interface, because I saw it yesterday, but I don't know if it's on here, on the documentation yet. Okay, let's try this, visual interface. Okay, and the answer is yes. Okay, so today's May 17th. You'll see this information was published on April 5th, and I'm going to play this. Oh, look, it's a 6-minute video. How cool is that? So it might not show completely, but I'm going to put it on pause. I'm going to encourage you to look at this, and the reason is because one of the, and again, here it shows it on the interface. So this is what it looks like now. Let me go down the bottom of the screen, see if there's anything. So you'll see this drag and drop interface. This represents our new generation drag and drop connected to Azure Machine Learning Service. And one thing that's different now in this new service is we're separating the experiment from the compute. And I personally have not used it yet. I have not used our new environment. And the reason being because in my use case working with clients, I'm only using technologies that are currently released. And I only recommend going to preview if you're willing to handle the fact they may remove features, the engineering team may remove features before it goes to production. So you don't want to build any production solutions as a general rule on preview software. So that right now this is still in preview to my knowledge. But the point is that by removing the current environment, it's serverless, which means the managed service, and you are competing with everyone else who is in that service. In this new service environment, you have your own compute and you're able to do that. So again, I could not speak to exactly how that works, but I am very optimistic about the experience improving. We can see here now the experiments from the new panel. I have showed this in my last presentation here on training Python scikit models. And so I would certainly recommend going through here, and then you go to deployment, and then it shows about how to deploy. And I notice here that there's some sort of video, it looks like coming up, just showing how this is done on the new interface. So I would give it some, give it a look. Okay, isn't it? Microsoft FTE, can we get reimbursed for exams out of our track? The answer is yes. So send me email. I'm going to say probably. All right, because we're getting recorded here, so I don't fully know that answer, but to my knowledge, Microsoft pays for certification exams. Someone asked about ML Studio being used in production with my clients. Do they have issues with model versioning and all that? And the answer is, in their cases, they will just make a new experiment every time they have a new version of something. And it is not a format that some people want to do currently. And my only comment is, even working with a client this week, that if the high priority in a solution is versioning and repositories and CI/CD, perhaps the best way to go is not with this drag and drop, but instead just writing Python code and taking that Python code, and maybe you use this technology to put all your Python code in here, but then put your Python code into a repository or do something else. So these days, it depends on the project. And again, even at a particular client, they are not going to necessarily manage all their data science projects the same way, because there's that many varieties of things going on out there, and I've already seen that. So we're still early days for most organizations to develop rules and best practices. I will say one thing I mentioned earlier, according to this question, that there is a DevOps expert exam that exists. It will be based around our Azure DevOps, which was Visual Studio. It used to be called Visual Studio Team Services. Today, it's called Azure DevOps. And if you're in that situation where you have to do CI/CD and you have to make sure that repositories and DevOps practices are being followed, what I would recommend is definitely, if you don't take this exam, that at least you look at the content and see what Microsoft has to offer in this space. And I think we're increasingly going to see an integration. As you know, many people know Microsoft bought GitHub. And so now we are going to see an integration between the Azure solutions that are available and then also a fully responsible deployment, repository, CI/CD, and DevOps best practices. So that's probably what we are going to see going forward. Somebody asked about partner discounts or discounts in taking exams. Sometimes there are specials that are run online to take exams, and when I had to pay for them for myself, they sometimes would offer a 2-for-1 discount. So you may see those promotions offered. Pearson VUE is where I have been purchasing those certs, but what I was purchasing was the exam take. So the exam take went to Pearson VUE. I believe it still goes there from the website, but I don't know the details. But you may be able to find a discount. All right, we are at 1:04, and certainly thank everyone for attending this meeting today. I'll be stopping the recording.